Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome to the poem of the day for today, Saturday, November the 22nd, 2025. And it's been a little bit since my last video. I had a very busy week. But the last video that we had, I read Canto 2 of the Wasteland from this version. All the versions are the same, but this is the book that I'm working with here. And so this video will talk through some parts of Canto 2, a game of chess, and try to continue to trace some of the main themes and ideas that Eliot's working with throughout the poem. So there's two, I'm thinking three sections to this canto, and the reason that that's difficult is, again, that Eliot will often change voices throughout the cantos, throughout a lot of his poems, without really necessarily signaling that, right? There isn't and then so-and-so walked in and a setting of the scene. We just get sort of dropped in. And so the Wasteland has this quality to it, almost of this kind of floating presence of not really a narrator, but something that is drawing and diverting or directing our attention. I think of it very sort of cinematically as just kind of looking in upon a scene and then being like lifted out of it, and then spirit like kind of floating to a different space and briefly observing that scene. And these scenes never coalesce narratively into some sort of satisfying conclusion, but what they do offer is echoes, variations, commonalities upon similar things that Eliot is focused on and talking about in terms of, the modern urban city, industrialized London, and a world that's becoming more and more disenchanted, both with the past, but also with what technology, governments, meta-narratives, and the promise of the future is offering. So a game of chess runs from about line 76 to line 170, I think, 2. So it's about the length of the first canto, if a little bit shorter. And the first 25, almost 30 lines, I would say about 30 lines, I believe are one scene. And so this was the woman sitting in the chair alone, the burnished throne, it's described. And as we can come to expect from Eliot, this is going to be littered with lots of allusions to older literature. So the description, first of all, the title of Game of Chess is taken from a Thomas Middleton play, which I believe was 1625. And it was a biting satire that was attempted to be silenced because it basically allegorized the war between England and Spain as a chess match. And Middleton also had a work called Women Beware Women in 1657. It says, in which a young wife is seduced while her unwitting mother-in-law plays chess. So what this does is it takes a small, specific, particular, intimate moment, one in which a woman loses her self faculties, desires, because she's being seduced, while somebody else is is not watching over her and is just distracted. And it links it then to European international conflict within Western Europe. So there we can hear, even though it's not specifically England and Spain in Eliot's time, we hear critiques and echoes of the First World War in here. There's a lot of strong imagery throughout this section, these 35-ish lines, describing what the woman is surrounded by. And, we get this glowed marble, the glass, fruited vines, a golden cupidon, right? So the golden cupidon then again is kind of a suggestion of there being the potential for eros, or the potential of a love match being made here. We have the flames upon the candelabra. We have the glitter of her jewels. So this is a woman who is isolated and alone, but is surrounded by all of these ornate and beautiful luxuries. She's a higher class person, a higher class woman, but nonetheless is still being threatened by, many of the other things that we heard in the first canto, namely infertility, violence, in this case, the threat of sexual violence that we're going to see coming a little bit later. We get a description of sort of the unguent nature of the perfumes that are there, but those are synthetic. And the sense of odors stirring in the air with the candle flames. And here we get a second and third allusion. The first line, the chair she sat in, burnished like a throne, is taken from the description of Cleopatra and Antony and Cleopatra by Shakespeare. And then the line, flung their smoke into the Laquaria, is cited from Virgil's Aeneid. Okay. So a little bit further, then we also have a reference to the Sylvan scene. And the Sylvan scene is borrowed from book 4 of Milton's Paradise Lost. And then it says, the change of Philomel by the barbarous king so rudely forced. And then this rudely forced is a euphemism that was really common of a lot of the earlier Ovid translations. There's a very recent Ovid translation of the Metamorphosis from the last decade or so. And unfortunately, her name is escaping me at the moment, even though I just read it a couple months ago. I believe her first name is Stephanie, but I can't recall her last name right now. And the book is not with me. But she did another translation of Ovid's Metamorphosis and made it much more explicit when there were things like rudely forced. She said, taken, raped, instances like that throughout the poem, showing that for some strange reason, all of the translations had kind of softened the more violent and predatory aspects of several of the stories throughout Ovid's Metamorphosis, including this one, where Philomel is raped by, I think it's Tereus. Sorry, I should have looked that up before. And so with that reference in here, then with the Cupidon earlier, and then this, as though the window gave the sylvan scene the change of Philomel by the barbarous king so rudely forced. All of these allusions are giving a undercurrent of a threat of sexual violence, right? A threat of copulation between human beings not happening as something that is desired and romantic, but something that is, a crime, an act of violence, something that's not about fertility and life-giving, which we usually think of when we think of human sexuality. And so that echoes some of the things that we were seeing happening to the earth earlier. And those things can be united just with that word, the concept of rape, right? You can rape and pillage the land. And then in this case, there's the threat of rape happening to this woman. And then we get the jug in there, which is a onomatopoeia for supposedly the sound a nightingale makes. And then as she's listening, she's hearing the footsteps shuffling up the stair under the firelight. There's this really interesting image of her sort of brushing her hair, and then the hair extends out in these kind of fiery points. It says glowed into words and then would be savagely still. So there's an energy, almost like an animus, that's even kind of within the brushing of her hair that's here. And then this is, it's seemingly cut off. There's a stanza break here, and we get this dialogue between people that could be like later that day in the same spot, or a couple minutes later, or this could be the person who enters, or it could be somewhere else completely. But there seems to be a lack of continuity there, almost like a fade to black and a fade back in. But the conversation that happens afterward is one of kind of a nefarious seduction, right? So you get this person speaking that my nerves are bad tonight. Please stay with me. Speak. Why do you never speak? What are you thinking? I never know what you're thinking. So there's this anxiety and neurosis around someone trying to speak to somebody else who is silent to them, and also the inability to communicate or to understand what the other person is thinking because the communication is broken down here, which I think is something that was echoed from Prufrock, right? Where there's the line in there about, that's not what I meant at all. That's not it at all. But then we get a response as a short couplet. Well, not really. It's not rhyming. It's just 2 lines, but it's not quoted. And it just says, I think we are in Rat's Alley where the dead men lost their bones. And that's why I don't think this is the same scene as the scene previously, because this person, they may not be correct, but they're talking now that they're outside and they're kind of in this seedy alley way among London, where men's bones are being picked at by rats. But then the person says, "What's the noise?" The wind under the door. So now it seems as though we're maybe back inside. What is the noise again? Nothing. Again, nothing. And then the repeated anxious questions of, do you know nothing? Do you remember nothing? Do you see nothing? And then the response from this kind of disembodied voice that's not, that could be within someone's head because it's not quoted, is saying those are pearls that were his eyes, which, remember from the first canto, is the line that Ariel says or sings about presumably Ferdinand's drowned father. So we get that death by water again in there. And the death by water, I think for Eliot, a lot of the time is, not just taking the life force out, but also water doing its destructive power rather than the power of nurturing and growing the fertile land. And then we get this weird line about this weird kind of break-in of a song, the Shakespearean rag. It's so elegant, so intelligent. And this is, I would only know this by the footnote. It says a version of a popular song from 1912 called the Shakespearean rag. So he pulls in this very brief, like kind of odd pop song at the moment. You could almost imagine now that if someone was writing it, there would be like a quick little excerpt line of like a Taylor Swift song or something in the middle of the poem, which I don't think has a whole lot of resonance in terms of its content, but what I think it does in an interesting way is, again, puts us in that kind of stream of consciousness that someone has where subconsciously something rises to the surface that's buried in the back of your head. Randomly throughout the day, you might just hear like a line or a jingle from a commercial or something like that. And then we get, again, these anxious questions, this barrage of questions. What should I do now? What should I do now? My hair down. What should I do tomorrow? What should we ever do? And the response is the hot water at 10, which I'm assuming is a bath, right? And if it rains, a closed car at 4, and we shall play a game of chess, pressing lidless eyes and waiting for a knock upon the door. I think there's sexual innuendo within this, that if it's raining, they're going to be inside the closed car making love. And then the game of chess sounds almost like something like a, whether it's a struggle for power or whether it's an attempt at some sort of elaborate seduction remains unclear to me. But the whole context of the rest of the canto being about forcible sexual intercourse, about rape, I'm getting a undertone of kind of, I don't want to use the word nefarious again, but manipulation in here perhaps. Then we go to a completely different scene. And this is a dialogue between two women taking place in a pub at closing time. And you'll hear them both speaking very ill about other people, but also not really responding well to one another. And then we get this interruption about hurry up, please, it's time, hurry up, please, it's time, which presumably is, one of the people who's working at the bar cleaning up and trying to close up, but then these women won't leave. And it begins with when Lil's husband got demobbed, and demobbed means demobilized or released from armed services in World War I. And the speaker who says that about the husband coming back, Albert, that you must make yourself a bit smart. You look like crap, right? Doll yourself up, so to speak. And she says, I want to know what you did with the money he gave you to get yourself some teeth. So her teeth, probably again by some sort of disease, were worn down, were decayed. Again, we're getting this kind of death or this picking away of the bones, right? Which we heard with the Rat's Alley. And she says, you need to have them all out and get a nice set, just have all your teeth pulled and get some fake ones plucked in there because I can't bear to look at you. That's what she says. He said, I swear, I can't bear to look at you. And no more can I said, think of poor Albert. He's been in the army for 4 years and he wants a good time. So make yourself look pretty. Think of your poor husband. He's been at war for 4 years. And when he comes back, he's going to want to have sex with you. And you look like crap is what she's telling her. Right. And if you don't give it to someone, others will. So if he comes back and you're not looking like you're making an effort to meet him and embrace him and take him to bed, there's other women around who are going to do that for you is what she's telling her. And then this speaker is, putting herself as like someone who's kind of telling her friend the tough truth that she needs to hear. But then her friend, she says, responds to her as, and if that happens, I'll know who to thank. And she gave me a straight look like, oh, I'm suspecting it's you actually who's going to move in on my husband. She tries to continue this exchange. If you don't like it, you can get on with it. Others can pick and choose if you can't. But if Albert makes off, it won't be for lack of telling. So in other words, like, fine, I warned you, but if your husband leaves, it's not my fault, and you can't say that you didn't know it was going to happen. And then she keeps going on, kind of ripping on this woman. It's a shame you look so antique, you look so old, and you're only 31 years old. And the description tells us, I can't help it, she said, pulling a long face. It's the pills I took to bring them off. She's had 5 already and nearly died of young George. So she's had 5 kids, and then the last one must have been a very difficult pregnancy and delivery to the point that she almost died giving birth to this George. But then the pills I took to bring them off, so she must have gone to kind of like an illicit pharmacist to get abortion pills. And the abortion pills are having this gaunt, emptying, unhealthy, sickly look happening upon her. But then that also makes us wonder, right? We just heard that the husband's been away for 4 years, and it takes longer than 4 years to have a child. So what has she been up to, right? What has Lil been up to? And then she says, the chemist told me, that's the pharmacist, it would be all right, but I've never been the same. So what she's done to put an end to this pregnancy is something that's also hollowing her out and physically aging her, physically wearing her down, which again is just these images of decay and withering and wilting and death that we get throughout the entire poem. In this case, happening at the occasion of fertility, and happening to this woman. And then her response to her is, you are a fool. Why would you get married if you don't want children? Even though we found out she just had 5, right? But it seems lost on the woman telling the story that the math does not add up about whose child this would have been. And she says that, when he comes home, they had a hot ham, and they asked me to dinner to get the beauty of it hot. And then the conversation's cut off as everybody kind of says goodnight, the closing time at the end. But all of these good night, sweet ladies, good night, is taken from Hamlet, and it's the final lines that Olivia gives to Gertrude and Claudius before she goes off and dies. And you'll remember in Hamlet that Ophelia dies by drowning, right? Dies presumably by suicide, but she dies by drowning, which is another thing that we're hearing all throughout this poem, even that we heard in Canto 1 about, from the tarot card reader, Madame Sosostris, that beware death by water, right? She pulls the drowned Phoenician sailor. That's all I want to say about Canto 2. And the next video we'll be reading Canto 3, and then the successive one, again, will be an explanation of Canto 3. Canto 3 is a bit longer and windier and stranger still. So thank you for being with me. Hopefully some of these notes are illuminating some things for you. The poem is not going to come together as a very clear narrative where everything is going to seem to be explained. One, I'm just not good enough as a reader to do that. But secondly, I don't really think that's the intention that Eliot has for this. I think he's trying to evoke a mood and a state of mind of a place and a particular person in that place, and the alienation one has from the modern world that is so estranged from nature and fixated on death. That's all I'll say for today. So thank you for being with us, and until next time, may peace be with you.